Incredible photo captures the moment an orangutan reached out to help a conservationist who was stuck in a river. It was taken in Malaysia when the man was searching for dangerous snakes in the area to protect the local apes. This extremely rare translucent lobster was caught in the state of Maine. The man who caught it said he threw it back into the ocean because it was too small. Experts say the chances of finding a lobster like this are about 1 in 100 million. Thousands have climbed Mount Everest and 12 men have visited the moon, but only 3 people have ever been to the deepest point in the ocean. While meerkats are adorable, they're also the most murderous species on the planet by far. They've been known to kill members of their own species more frequently than any other animal that's been studied. In 2009, a Russian man named Artyom Sidorkin went to the doctors suspecting something wrong with his lungs. Initially, doctors thought they were dealing with a tumor, but it ended up being something they had never seen before. It turned out that years ago, he inhaled the seed of a fir tree and it started growing inside of him. Pigs have been known to feast on just about anything. There are even stories of pigs breaking into farmhouses and eating newborn babies. The ship that inspired the story of Moby Dick was named the Essex. After being shipwrecked by a sperm whale, the crew avoided stepping foot on surrounding islands out of fear of cannibals. But because of this bypass, the men soon ran out of food and were forced to eat each other for survival. People originally erased pencil mistakes using bread. That was until 1770 when Edward Nain accidentally picked up a piece of rubber instead of bread and found it to be very effective. This prompted him to sell rubber erasers, which were eventually developed into the ones we know today. Erasers exist to fix mistakes and were invented because of one. This is what the headquarters of Mussolini's Italian fascist party looked like in 1934. In the 1950s, atomic bomb tests were a big tourist attraction in Las Vegas. They advertised detonation times and the best viewing spots to see the bombs explode from 65 miles away. It's estimated that out of all the species that have ever lived on Earth, only a fraction of 1% have been fossilized. This means that more than 99% of the history of life will be forever unknown. When Teddy Roosevelt was 25, his wife and his mother both died on Valentine's Day just hours apart from each other. For his diary entry that day, he drew a large black X and wrote, "The light has gone out of my life." When some whales get old, they no longer have the strength to swim for long distances. So if they swim too deep, they might not have enough strength to reach the surface for air and eventually suffocate to death. Throughout your life, you're more likely to meet a future murderer than you are to have a lasting marriage. In 2010, a homeless man named Hugo saved a woman from a knife attack in New York City. He was stabbed while trying to help, but still chased the attacker before collapsing from his wounds. Security cams captured more than 20 people walking past and staring at him, but no one offered to help. He was found dead on the sidewalk more than an hour later. In the 1930s, a couple of married scientists conducted an experiment in which a chimpanzee named Gua was raised alongside their infant son Donald. For 9 months, they were raised as brother and sister as the parents recorded their development. While Gua learned many of the human behaviors before Donald, the experiment was stopped abruptly because Donald started behaving more like a chimp. If you jangle your keys at a moth that has ears, it will do a backflip. This is an adaptation to the echolocation of bats, which is a high-pitched noise. The moth will drop out of the air and pretend that it's dead to avoid being eaten by a bat. The deepwater blobfish actually looks like a normal fish when it's in its natural habitat. It only looks ugly and bloated after undergoing extreme depressurization when fishermen try to reel it in. You should never shine a flashlight on a newborn sea turtle. If the flash is too long, the turtle will start crawling around in circles known as the ring of death. This means the turtle's eyesight has been permanently damaged due to mistaking your light for the moon that guides it to the sea. By doing this, you are basically sentencing the turtle to death right after its birth. The first chainsaw was invented by 2 Scottish doctors in the year 1780. It was originally used to help open up the pelvis during childbirth. Alexander Litvinenko was a former Russian spy who solved his own murder case. He was poisoned with a cup of tea in a London hotel and was quickly hospitalized. Working with Scottish detectives as he lay dying, he managed to trace the lethal substance to a former comrade in the Russian Secret Service. Serial killer and cannibal Richard Chase only attacked victims who had their doors unlocked. He took locked doors as a sign that he wasn't welcome, but unlocked doors were an invitation to come inside. Troy Leon Gregg was a death row inmate in Georgia who escaped the night before his execution. But that same night, he ended up being killed in a bar fight. Donald Harvey was a nurse and serial killer who killed 37 of his patients with cyanide. He was only caught when one of his victims' coroners had the rare genetic ability to smell cyanide. Frank Sinatra died on May 14, 1998, the same night as the series finale of Seinfeld. His ambulance made it to the hospital in record time due to there being no traffic since everyone was home watching the show. About 1 in 50 people is walking around with a brain aneurysm that just hasn't ruptured yet. This means there's a chance you can instantly die from a headache without any prior symptoms. The astronauts on the Challenger most likely didn't die immediately from the explosion. They spent the last 3 minutes of their lives plummeting to Earth at 200 miles an hour. In 2015, the Department of Homeland Security conducted a test on the TSA at dozens of airports. A group of agents posing as passengers snuck various weapons through airport security. The TSA ended up failing to detect 95% of the weapons that went through the scanning system. In 1982, the Almeida family lost their pet tortoise Manuela while their house was being renovated. 30 years later, they were cleaning out the attic after their father died and miraculously found Manuela still alive. They think she was able to survive by eating termites in the furniture that their father was hoarding. Just hours after the death of Nintendo CEO Satoru Iwata, a rainbow was seen over the Nintendo headquarters. Fans dubbed it the Rainbow Road to Heaven. In 2019, 30-year-old mother Emma Scholes ran through her burning home to save her 6 children. She ran from room to rescue her kids while suffering from third-degree burns over 93% of her body. For several weeks, she hovered between life and death but eventually survived. When talking about the incident, she said, "I thought I had to get the kids out, then I could die." These are some morbid facts that you didn't know about the Jonestown Massacre. While Jim Jones tried to convince his members that he saved them from a concentration camp, most survivors compared Jonestown to a war prison. Each day, adults had to work at least 12 hours in scorching heat and were given very little water. The grounds were also constantly patrolled by armed guards so that no one could leave. Congressman Leo Ryan is the only member of the U.S. Congress to ever be killed in the line of duty. He was assassinated while investigating the Jonestown cult and helping some members escape. About 300 of the victims were infants and children. They were either force-fed or injected with cyanide, and their screams can be clearly heard in the Jonestown death tapes. One elderly member was taking a nap while everyone else was committing the largest mass suicide in modern history. She woke up to more than 900 dead bodies scattered around her. George Washington died when his doctors were trying to cure his sore throat. They were using a process called bloodletting, which involved draining a patient's blood until their illness was cured. He lost nearly half his blood before they stopped the treatment, and he died just a few hours later. According to the FBI, if you're murdered in the US, there's only about a 40% chance that your murderer will be found and punished. When penguins can't find love, they often waddle off to die alone. An Iranian man named Amu Haji is known as the world's dirtiest man. The 80-year-old man hasn't showered in 65 years and claims that cleanliness makes man sick. He has survived off of eating rotten animal carcasses and smokes feces out of a pipe. He also lives in complete isolation, and yes, ladies, he's single. American soldier Henry Gunther was killed just 1 minute before World War I was officially ended. He bravely charged at a German roadblock filled with armed soldiers. The Germans tried waving him off, knowing that the armistice would be signed within a few moments. Apparently he got too close, fired a couple rounds, and was killed instantly. Sunken World War II ships at the bottom of the ocean are actually extremely valuable. They're one of the only sources of steel in the world that remains uncontaminated by nuclear radiation. Though you may not recognize him, you probably wouldn't be alive today if it weren't for this man. During the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, Vasily Arkhipov of the Soviet Navy was ordered to fire a nuclear torpedo. But even though he was second in command, he refused. If it wasn't for his decision, a nuclear war would have broken out across the world. In 2010, the body of Argentinian model Joana Casas was found just before her 20th birthday. She had been shot twice in the head and was left in a field. Her former boyfriend was soon convicted of the murder and sentenced to 13 years in prison. 3 years later, while still in prison, the man ended up falling in love with Joanna's twin sister Edith. Despite her parents intervening, Edith went on to marry her twin sister's murderer. In 2008, a Kansas man named Corey McFerrin called 911 claiming there was something wrong with his girlfriend. When authorities arrived, they were horrified to find that his 35-year-old girlfriend had been sitting on the toilet for at least 2 years. Her skin had grown around the toilet seat and had to be surgically removed at the hospital. Her boyfriend claimed that because of her troubled childhood, she felt safe in the bathroom and never left. Some species of tarantulas keep tiny frogs as pets. The frog is protected from predators, and in return, the tarantula's burrow is protected from pests that are too small for the spider to deal with. Cats were likely domesticated by humans through the same process. Farmers who own ostrich farms often struggle with breeding. This is because ostriches are sometimes more attracted to humans than other ostriches. Cheetahs are so closely related that you can freely transplant organs between each member of the species without immunosuppression. In 1970, Fraser the lion was adopted by a safari in Florida at the age of 18, which is the human equivalent to the age of 80. He was blind, toothless, and could barely walk, but was still responsible for the births of 35 cubs at the park. D.B. Cooper's successful plane hijacking in 1971 was followed by dozens of copycats. One such copycat was Vietnam War veteran and paratrooper Rob Dolan Heady. He successfully extorted $200,000 and jumped out of the plane near Washoe Lake, Nevada. He would have gotten away with it, but police were able to find his car parked near the lake. What gave it away was a bumper sticker of the United States Parachute Association. In 2002, 3 Catholic nuns from Tennessee managed to break into a United States nuclear missile launch facility. As an anti-war protest, they vandalized the entire facility and drew crosses on the silo with their own blood. Nuclear weapons experts called it the biggest security breach in the history of the nation's atomic complex. The Great Kanto earthquake of 1923 shook Japan with so much intensity that it caused the formation of a deadly phenomenon known as a fire tornado. Horrified witnesses could do nothing to save themselves since it got so hot that their shoes melted to the pavement. The fire soon ripped through the center of Tokyo, incinerating 40,000 people in about 3 minutes. The Burnden Park disaster was a human crush that occurred in 1946 at the Burnden Park football stadium in England. Overcrowding led to the deaths of 33 people and injuries to hundreds more. The dead bodies were then left covered on the sidelines and the game was restarted about 30 minutes later. Afterwards, many players said they were sickened by the fact that the game was allowed to continue. In 2016, Mark Hamill paid a visit to a dying Star Wars fan in the hospital. He then proceeded to answer every question as Luke Skywalker since the fan could no longer distinguish between reality and fiction. In 1979, Elvita Adams attempted suicide by jumping off the Empire State Building. She jumped from the 86th floor but was suddenly blown back to the 85th floor due to a sudden gust of strong wind. A man named Bill Hast injected himself with snake venom for several years to build up his immunities. He survived nearly 200 venomous snake bites, donated his blood to snake bite victims, and lived to the age of 100. In the 1880s, the director of the Harvard Observatory was frustrated with his staff and would say, quote, "My Scottish maid could do better." So to jokingly prove a point, he hired his Scottish maid. Williamina Fleming proceeded to lead a team for decades, classified tens of thousands of stars, and discovered the Horsehead Nebula. Astronauts lose about 1% of their bone mass each month, most of which is excreted through their urine. So essentially, astronauts slowly pee their skeletons out. Scientists believe there's a 9th planet in our solar system that's about 10 times larger than Earth. They haven't been able to locate it yet, but they know it's there due to its gravitational effects on other objects. When a 20-year-old Rod Serling was serving in World War II, he watched as his best friend was killed by a falling crate of food. Realizing the irony and unpredictability of life and death, this experience would later inspire him to create the Twilight Zone. Male chicks are considered to be virtually useless to the egg industry. So they're either suffocated in large garbage bags or are shoveled into a high-speed grinder to be torn apart. Kissing a baby on the ear can make it go deaf due to a condition known as cochlear ear kiss injury. Indonesian villager Akbar Salubira went missing in 2017 after setting off for harvest. His remains were found 2 days later inside the body of a reticulated python. It was the first confirmed case of a snake swallowing a fully grown adult human being. Morbid facts that you didn't know about the Holocaust. It's said that Hitler's worst enemies were kept at Mauthausen concentration camp, where prisoners were forced to carry 100-pound stones up this structure known as the Stairs of Death. Exhausted prisoners would often collapse and drop their loads, creating a horrific domino effect. In the 1980s, a family owned a ceramic factory in California, but it was uncovered as an illegal crematorium when a passerby recognized the smell of burning bodies from his time at Auschwitz. SS leader Heinrich Himmler ordered for the construction of the gas chambers when he was concerned about what psychological impacts that shooting people would leave on his men. During World War II, future President Dwight Eisenhower predicted that people would try to deny that the Holocaust ever happened. So he ordered his men to take as many graphic photos as possible to prevent this from happening. These are some of the craziest war tactics that actually worked. Hannibal of Carthage was famous for intimidating his Roman enemies through the use of war elephants. But the Romans eventually learned that elephants are afraid of squealing pigs. So they would lather pigs in tar and set them on fire, sending the enemy elephants fleeing in horror. A Chinese general with only 100 men once had to defend a town against 150,000 troops. So he told his men to hide, left the gates open, and sat on the walls playing a lute. Certain that it was a trap, the opposing general ordered a full retreat. One of the reasons why the plague was spread to Europe was because the Mongols literally sent it there. When they were trying to conquer the city of Kaffa, they would catapult infected bodies over the city walls. This was also one of the first historical accounts of biological warfare. After the first plane hit the North Tower, people in the South Tower wanted to leave, but were advised by an announcement to stay at their seats. Some tried to leave anyway, but were turned back by security at the exits. More than 600 people ended up dying when the tower went down. Afghan resistance leader Ahmad Shah Massoud warned about a major terrorist attack that was about to happen on US soil. He ended up being assassinated just 2 days before 9/11. Many 9/11 rescue dogs started becoming depressed because they weren't finding any live bodies. Rescue workers had to constantly bury themselves to trick the dogs into thinking they actually saved somebody. Tanya Head was a well-known 9/11 survivor who faked being in the South Tower during the attacks. She served as president of the WTC Survivors Network for years before people found out that she wasn't even in the country on 9/11. Before filming Interstellar, Christopher Nolan planted 500 acres of corn just for the movie because he didn't want to use CGI. After filming, he sold all the corn and made back profit for the budget. In The Matrix, which came out in 1999, Neo's passport expires on September 11th, 2001. Real skeletons were used in the filming of Poltergeist because it was cheaper than making prop ones. The actress wasn't told they were real until after the shooting finished. This was the original design of Voldemort, which many find far more terrifying than what they went with. The Italian version of Moana is called Oceania because there was already a famous porn star named Moana in Italy. In one of the scenes of The Iron Giant, you can see a moving star near the moon. This is because the movie is set in 1957, the same year that the first satellite Sputnik was launched into orbit. In 1984, comedian Tommy Cooper died of a heart attack while performing live on stage. Thinking it was all part of the show, the audience continued to laugh and clap as the man was gasping for air. In 1300 BC, Egyptian King Meneptah defeated the Libyans in battle. To prove of his triumph, he brought back 6,000 tan bananas that he cut off of opposing soldiers. When a very tall man dies and can't afford a custom coffin, the undertaker will often chop off his feet and place them beside his legs. The family doesn't notice because only the top half of the coffin is open during the funeral. In 2015, a woman claimed that she could smell Parkinson's disease. To test this, doctors gave her 12 shirts to smell and 6 of them were from Parkinson's patients. She correctly identified the 6 shirts but also chose one from the control group. 8 months later, that person was diagnosed with Parkinson's. On the same day that the ship sank, there was a lifeboat training drill scheduled that was canceled last minute by the captain. If the drill took place, it's estimated that hundreds more lives would have been saved. But instead, the process was complete chaos and many boats left when they weren't even at full or even half capacity. A boy named Frank Goldsmith Jr. survived the sinking, then moved into a home near Tiger Stadium in Detroit. But he never took his boys to a ball game because the cheers of the crowd reminded him of the screaming of the passengers on the Titanic. Many survivors, however, claim that hearing all the screams wasn't even the worst part. The only thing creepier was the fact that all the screaming stopped around the same moment and was followed by complete silence. In 2017, a woman named Glenna Durham killed her husband after shooting him 5 times. Soon afterwards, the couple's pet African gray parrot started repeating the words, "Don't effing shoot." It was assumed that these were the husband's last words, and the woman was eventually found guilty of first-degree murder. Serial killer Dennis Rader, aka the BTK Killer, used to install security systems for homeowners. Many of his clients wanted the security systems to keep the BTK Killer from ever entering their homes, unaware that he was the one installing them. In 2015, a man broke into a ranch in Nova Scotia and quite literally made himself at home. He fed the cats and horses, did laundry, took a shower, and used the homeowner's toothbrush. He even wrote in their diary and was watching TV on the couch when they came home. Author of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, is said to have lost her virginity on top of her mother's grave. She also kept her dead husband's heart and carried it around for 30 years until her death in 1851. In North Korea, viewing or selling porn is strictly forbidden and is said to be punishable by death. If you win the lottery, you're about 20 times more likely to be murdered than the average person. In 2016, a seemingly abandoned yacht drifted towards some fishermen off the coast of the Philippines. But when they boarded the ship, they found the mummified remains of a German man who had been missing for 7 years. To this day, the man's cause of death remains a mystery. While it looks like something from Star Wars, the Valais Blacknose is a species of domestic sheep found in Switzerland. They're known for their shaggy coats, spiral horns, and pitch-black faces. A Russian helicopter discovered this strange giant crater in Siberian permafrost. Some scientists say it's a new type of sinkhole, but its true origins remain a mystery. There's a species of octopus that cares for her eggs for 53 months without eating, then dies. This is the longest brooding period of any known animal species. Farmers in Botswana have started painting faces on their cows' butts to prevent lions from sneaking up on them. The New Mexico whiptail is a species of lizard that is 100% female. Nicknamed the lesbian lizards, they still mate with each other to stimulate egg growth without transferring genetics. On New Year's Eve in 2011, a suicide bomber planned on blowing up Moscow's crowded Red Square with a mobile phone bomb. But her plan failed when she received a spam text wishing her a Happy New Year. This caused the bomb to go off while she was still at the safe house, and she was the only fatality. The Great Whiskey Fire of Dublin killed 13 people in 1875, but none of them died as a result of smoke inhalation or burns. All victims died of alcohol poisoning as a result of drinking the free whiskey. In 1871, Ohio lawyer Clement Vallandigham was defending a client who was charged with murder. While showing the court how the victim might have accidentally shot himself, Clement accidentally shot himself. He won. In 1985, Professor of Oceanography Robert Ballard announced a mission to find the Titanic. But it was really a cover story for a classified mission to find lost nuclear submarines. But the team finished early, so they decided to spend the extra time searching for the Titanic and ended up actually finding it. After trick photography was developed in 1856, headless portraits became a trend during the Victorian era. In ancient Egypt, servants were smeared with honey to attract flies away from the pharaoh. During medieval times, it was common to have 2 sleeps per night. You would sleep for 4 to 5 hours, wake up for about 2 hours, then sleep for another 3 to 4. Scientists have suggested that we may have evolved this way to tend to the fire in order to keep us warm and safe. Redditors who work at remote places, what creepy things have you noticed while at work? I used to work at a Boy Scout summer camp. Every week I had to take a big group of campers to a secluded spot for their wilderness survival badge. On this one night it was getting late, so I sent all the campers to their shelters and started cleaning up the fire. That's when we heard in the distance what sounded like church bells. We were all a little creeped out since there were no churches or towns within 20 miles of us. After the bells stopped, the singing started. It sounded like church choir music, but with a lot of people and a lot more enthusiastic. All of the campers were super creeped out, but I lied to them, telling them there was a church service going on at the camp. Eventually, at almost 1 a.m., the singing stopped. I found out a few days later that there had been a huge KKK rally only a few miles away that night, and that's what we had heard. In 2009, actor Dean Winters suffered from a bacterial infection and died in the ambulance but was revived. After recovering, he developed gangrene and had multiple amputations and skin grafts. He is now better known for playing Mayhem in Allstate insurance commercials. Janis Joplin changed her will just 2 days before dying at the age of 27. She gave her estate to her parents and gave additional cash to her siblings. She even set aside $2,500 for her friends to throw a party in her honor and to, quote, get blasted after I'm gone. Cat burning was a form of entertainment in France prior to the 1800s. People would gather cats in a net and burn them over a bonfire while they laughed and cheered. This was done mainly because cats were associated with witchcraft and were burned as symbols of the devil. What is the creepiest thing you've seen in the woods or in remote areas? Back when I was a kid, some friends and I came across people in robes chanting around a campfire in the woods. We were staying at a friend's house for a birthday party and went for a late night walk. This was back in the late 80s during the Satanic Panic. Looking back now, I'm sure it was just some teenagers goofing off, but at the time it scared the living bejesus out of us. I'd been at football training with a few of my cousins when I was about 10 years old. We decided to take a walk before our parents picked us up, so we went along the canal towpath. My cousin looked down in the canal and saw a really nice jacket floating along, and being a weird scavenger person, decided to reach in and fish it out. Well, the jacket turned over, and so did the man wearing it. He also had no face left. Not gonna lie, that was rough. What is the scariest story you know that is 100% real? I was working the evening shift at a gas station. A man comes in all disoriented, so I go to help him out. He has a gash on his head and doesn't know where he was. I couldn't see any crashes around, so I assumed he had fallen or something. Normally, we're supposed to stay behind the glass shielded register area whenever someone is in the store. I, being a nice human being, went to help while calling the police/EMS. They got there and checked him out and thought that his head may have been fractured. They took him to the ER and I went back to work. Cops stopped back on by for some coffee a few hours later. They told me the guy got hit by a baseball bat trying to break into a little girl's bedroom and was wanted for rape and murder in 2 other states. I never left the register area at night again. This Columbine class of '99 photo was taken just a few months before the shooting. In the top left corner, shooters Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold can be seen making shooting gestures at the camera while wearing sunglasses. This is a game of hangman that a group of students played while they were locked in their classroom during the shooting. While being at one mass shooting is horrifying and unlucky enough, Regina Road was at 2 of them. 8 years after surviving Columbine, she was a student at Virginia Tech when 32 people were killed. On the day of the shooting, 2 10-kilogram bombs were planted in the school cafeteria right before lunch. Luckily, the bombs failed to detonate, otherwise all 488 students in the cafeteria at the time could have died. These melted chairs were the result of Dylan Klebold trying to set off one of those bombs with a Molotov cocktail. Female mummies in ancient Egypt were always more decomposed than their male counterparts. Researchers would later discover that this was because male bodies were embalmed a lot sooner than female bodies. Unlike male bodies, female bodies were kept at the family home until they started to decompose. The only reason this was done was to prevent the embalmers from getting weird with the bodies. Children who are victims of hot car deaths are often found with large portions of their hair ripped out. The only reason dogs love squeaky toys is because they sound like little animals dying. Every unborn baby grows a mustache in the womb, which then spreads to cover the entire body. The baby then eats this fine hair called lanugo, then excretes it after birth with their first bowel movement. People that do autopsies, what's the weirdest thing that you have found that didn't have anything to do with the person's death? Pennies. Hundreds of pennies, nearly $6 worth inside the skin all over the arms and legs. Deceased was a hermit, lived alone, ordered out for every meal. Apparently he'd been surgically implanting pennies in his skin for years. No effing clue why. Once spoke with a pathologist at a conference. During her training, they were doing an autopsy on a body that was found by the river. They did a CAT scan and something looked funny about his gut. When they opened him up, his stomach moved. It was a snake that had burrowed inside his body. It even struck and bit one of the techs before they realized what was going on. These are some morbid facts that you didn't know about the Lincoln assassination. Lincoln's bodyguard was an alcoholic who had previously gotten in trouble for drinking on the job. He wasn't at his post to protect Lincoln that night because he was next door drinking at the Star Saloon, the same saloon where John Wilkes Booth was drinking to build up the courage to assassinate the president. The chair that Lincoln was shot in still has his bloodstains on it. John Wilkes Booth also planned on assassinating Ulysses S. Grant along with Lincoln, but he didn't attend the play because his wife was on bad terms with Lincoln's wife at the time. Instead, the other man in Lincoln's balcony was military officer Henry Rathbone. After the assassination, he was overwhelmed with guilt for the rest of his life for not preventing it. He slowly went mad and eventually stabbed his wife to death before he was committed to a mental asylum for the rest of his life. What's the creepiest thing that happened to you personally that made you question reality? I was living in Boston. I woke up at 3 a.m. or so to my cat jumping onto my bed and curling in between my calf muscles and going to sleep. My cat would do this every night since I was 5 years old. That was his spot. It was something I was very familiar with. Thing is, my cat was living with my parents on the West Coast, so I couldn't understand what the hell I just felt. But I knew it was my cat. I just figured I was dreaming. Got a call from my parents the following morning that my cat had died around midnight the previous night. That was 3 hours behind since I was on the East Coast. Guess that was my cat traveling to Boston to come see me one last time. Redditors with significant others who talk in their sleep. What is the creepiest thing they've said? I talk in my sleep regularly, but one instance comes to mind. My significant other said she was going to the bathroom in the middle of the night. On her way back, I said, "It's following you," and went back to sleep. My wife doesn't talk in her sleep, but I did once wake up to her standing over me and staring at me Paranormal Activity style. It was terrifying, and she has no recollection of it. She said, "Too many Asians here." I'm Asian. I crawled into bed when she was asleep. She reached over and grabbed my arm. She snuggled my arm a bit and I thought it was sweet. Until, with a thick Russian accent, she says, "I break you," and acted like she was snapping my arm. Soft, creepy laughter, then immediately propping up at a 90-degree angle saying, "It's all part of the show," then going back to sleep. The ancient Romans didn't have toothpaste or toothbrushes, but they had perfect teeth because their diets were so low in sugar. The Guinness Book of World Records recognizes the 1927 presidential election of Liberia as the most fraudulent in history. Although there were only 15,000 registered voters in Liberia at the time, Charles D.B. King received 234,000 and won the election. Incest was encouraged in ancient Egypt, as with many aristocracies, to keep the bloodline pure. Moreover, if they were twins and one was a boy and one was a girl, they were married at birth because it was assumed that they must have banged in the womb. What is the creepiest or most unexplained thing that's happened to you that you still think about to this day? I had a recurring nightmare of a pitch-black parasite sucking the life out of me. Sometimes it would wait in dark corners for me to go to bed, and my cats always slept on my bed when it happened. It was a very stressful time for me, and I soon got an itch in the area of my chest where I dreamed the parasite was sucking the life out of me. I eventually got sick and felt a pea-sized lump in the same spot, so I went to my doc and they ordered a biopsy. As it turned out, I had male breast cancer at the age of 28. After I got well again, the dream never came back, and my cats slept in their usual places again instead of on my bed. The dream was creepy enough, but what made it for me was my cats protecting me.